Hi, this is Congressman Juan Vargas, and welcome to the first episode of a new podcast series in which I'll discuss the ins and outs of representing you in Congress. Today, Cesar Chavez Day, is a very meaningful day for many constituents and essential workers in my district. In honor of Cesar Chavez Day, we will touch on some of the collaborative work we are doing in Congress to pass immigration reform. I have been a member of Congress, the Hispanic Congress Caucus, for 8 years. We call it the CHC. The CHC addresses national and international issues, and collectively we craft policies that impact Hispanic and Latino communities in the United States, Puerto Rico, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. With that said, I'm very excited about my guest today. Congressman Raul Ruiz was recently selected to serve as the Congressional Hispanic Caucus's chairman for the 117th Congress. He represents California's 36th district, which includes the entire Coachella Valley, as well as the cities of Banning, Beaumont, Blythe, Hemet, and San Jacinto. As members of the CHC and congressional neighbors, Raul Ruiz and I are working together to address issues important to both our districts. Chairman Ruiz, we've had the opportunity to work together, and I appreciate that we have co-sponsored some legislation, such as bills addressing cross-border pollution in our districts. Today, I would like to talk about our collective work as members of the CHC. Again, I'm very happy to have this important discussion, but I have to tell the listeners that I think that Dr. Ruiz really is one of the most distinguished people in Congress. Dr. Ruiz, welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background first? It's so interesting. It really is.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Juan. I really appreciate you saying that. Look, I'm the son of farm workers, and so today, Cesar Chavez Day, is very personal to me. Of course, my older brother was the first to graduate from high school. I grew up in Coachella. Many of your listeners know where Coachella is in the eastern Riverside County, and we lived in a farm worker trailer park growing up before my dad was promoted to work in the packing house, and that was when we were able to move into our home where my mother still lives in the city of Coachella. And so my older brother was first to go to college. I followed. I went to UCLA. Then I went to Harvard Medical School. I graduated with a master's in public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School, a master's in public health from the Harvard School of Public Health, and my medical degree from Harvard Medical School, and came back after 17 years when I left home as a 17-year-old to fulfill a promise I made to the community to serve as a doctor at one of our hospitals, an emergency department. I'm an emergency medicine physician with public health expertise, and started doing my work in the community, and never held office before, never participated in a campaign before, and decided to run for Congress. And I won in 2012 when we were both classmates that year, and we've been serving together ever since. I serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee, in the Health Subcommittee, the Environment and Climate Change, and the Oversight Investigation Subcommittees as well.
Well, Dr. Ruiz, I think with all those Harvard degrees, there must be a record in there. You probably have more Harvard degrees than any member of Congress. That's probably true, isn't it?
I don't know. What I do know is when I graduated, actually, from the School of Public Health in 2007, Harvard wrote an article saying they believed I was the first Latino to have 3 graduate degrees from Harvard. But I'm still waiting for the person who has the 3 graduate degrees from Harvard first to really say, no, wait a minute, it was me. So, that's why I always preface it by saying they believe that I was the first. But you're also an alumni from Harvard. In fact, it's pretty remarkable that you used to play basketball with President Barack Obama back in your day, when both of you were at Harvard, right?
Well, yeah, but I wasn't a very good player. Let me tell you, I wish that I would have been better. Well, Dr. Ruiz, we're very proud that you're our boss, and you're the chief, that you're the chairman. We really are. let's jump into now the discussion for today, immigration reform. Now, President Biden's administration has put forward the U.S. Citizens Act of 2021. I think you and I can agree that the CHC needs to work collectively to ensure that immigration reform legislation continues to be a top priority for the Biden administration. What are your thoughts about that, Dr. Ruiz?
Well, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus fought hard to be the driving force in immigration reform. We've been the driving force in the past several years, and it is, as we all know, one of the most difficult, contentious, and partisan issues, which unfortunately is the case. But we're now building momentum to make sure that it's bipartisan. So the Biden's immigration reform plan landed in the hands of CHC members because of our advocacy. Linda Sanchez in the House is carrying the bill, and Bob Menendez in the Senate is carrying the bill. We have an all of the above, any which way strategy to get our immigration bills onto President Biden's desk. And the first 3 months, we really focused on a 3-bill push to pass the House of Representatives. We passed the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, which has CHC authors. The primary author is a good friend of CHC, Zoe Lofgren. And we passed the Dream and Promise Act, which had all CHC members as original co-sponsors, and the primary author is Lucille Roybal-Allard, who has many years working in championing immigration reform and policies for Congress and our nation. And with those two bills, there is a pathway to citizenship for approximately 4 million people in our country. Now we need to cover the gap because we know we have 11 million undocumented individuals, and the U.S. Citizenship Act is very important to make sure that all 11 million have an earned pathway to citizenship. Those two other bills passed the House of Representatives this month, and we've been in communication with Senator Durbin and Majority Leader Schumer about the strategy to get those through the Senate.
Well, I have to say, one of the things that I saw, and I mean, I was part of it, but you really were the principal person responsible to get some bipartisan support. I mean, as tough as this is right now because of obviously the era that we're living in, and some of the things that are being said on some of the more right-wing newspapers and media shows, you were able to get bipartisan support for both of these bills, were you not?
Yes, we received 9 Republican votes with the Dream and Promise Act, which focuses on a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers, TPS holders, and DED holders as well. And we got a remarkable 30 Republicans to vote for the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. And alongside Zoe Lofgren, Lucille Roybal-Allard, as well as Linda Sanchez, who also spoke about the U.S. Citizenship Act, and myself, we went to different caucuses to talk about these bills. And so we're very pleased. I mean, 9 Republicans and for the Dream and Promise Act, and 30 Republicans voting for the Farm Workforce Modernization Act can really provide the momentum and the justification, the motivation, and the boost that Senate Republicans need to vote for these bills. As a standalone, you know that there needs to be 10 Republicans to vote with all Democrats in the Senate to pass an individual bill out of the Senate. But of course, we also have the any which way part of our strategy, which means that we can use budget reconciliation to have a pathway to citizenship for the essential workers, Dreamers, as well as TPS holders and DED holders as well.
Well, I have to say, I really do want to congratulate you on your leadership on this issue, because I think it was remarkable how many people, ultimately, how many Republicans voted for these two important bills, in Congress. I mean, it really was remarkable that during this, unfortunate moment where, a lot of politicians are using this in a negative way, immigration, that you were able to get Republicans to vote for this. I really was surprised how many people came aboard. But you did mention now the Senate. Now, the Senate does create a challenge. You mentioned it a little bit, but democracy doesn't work the same in the Senate as it does in the House. You have to get more votes than just the majority. And you were saying all the above. Why don't you explain that a little bit to the listeners? Because I think a lot of listeners don't understand, why it is that, if you can get a majority, things can't pass in the Senate. Why do they get bogged down in the Senate?
Well, there's that filibuster rule that requires a certain amount of votes to pass any bill in the Senate. It's 60, 60 out of 100 in order to pass any bill out of the Senate as individual bills. So with the current makeup right now, with 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans, that means that we need to have 10 Republicans voting with all Democrats to pass any legislation out of the House. Of course, there's been talks about voting to remove the filibuster. That would also requires the Democrats to vote in favor of that. We have 2 Democrats that are not in favor of making those changes right now. But as time goes on and the pressure increases, that might be a possibility. In which case, if you remove that rule, then you can pass bills with 51 votes. In which case, if there's 50 Democrats voting for a bill with 50 Republicans, then the Vice President, Kamala Harris, would come in casting the tie-breaking vote in the Senate. But the other way that we've been passing legislation, including the American Rescue Plan, when there's such a partisan divide, is to go through the budget reconciliation process. And that process requires certain elements of the bill that would pass what is known as the Byrd Rule, created by Senator Byrd back in the day, which means that the bill would have to meet the mandate of the budget resolution or the purpose of the budget committee, and that would limit any kind of authorizing pieces of legislation that have nothing to do with the budget. But we know that immigration reform increases our GDP. We know that it boosts our economy, and therefore it'll increase our revenue. It will decrease our expenditures on social services because people will have jobs and better paying jobs. And so therefore we have a very strong case to make that having a pathway to citizenship for our essential workers, for dreamers, for farm workers, for TPS holders, contributes to our economy and therefore is definitely a budget issue. And that's what we're also advocating for as well.
Well, thank you for bringing that part up. I think a lot of people miss that immigration, it's been fundamentally part of our history and really the world. But at the same time, it's a good business decision. I mean, we are a nation of immigrants, but all the studies that we read said that's been a good thing, that immigrants create new opportunities. A lot of the Fortune 500 companies were either immigrants or first generation. And so thank you for bringing that up. I do hope that the Senate doesn't get bogged down in some of these very strange voting procedures that they have, and instead they pass the Dreamers Act and also the new act to get farm workers back in the fields because they want to work, and obviously farmers want them to do that. But again, I think we're going to be judged. We're going to be judged how we treat immigration, because it has been so essential for our country in the sense of progressing, becoming wealthier, giving people opportunities, really being the refuge for people around the world when things go wrong. I mean, for Ireland, for Germany, for Italy, certainly for Latin America. So thank you for pointing all that out. I do appreciate that.
There's another very important reason why we need to do this at this precise moment, Congressman, some will say, well, wait a minute, we're in a pandemic. and we have a lot of our citizens that are hurting right now. And we need to take care of our domestic issues first and foremost. I reply that it is precisely now, because of those reasons, that we need to pass the immigration reform bill, as well as the Farm Workforce Modernization Act and the Dream and Promise Act. And the reason for the Farm Workforce Modernization Act is that our farm workers have had the highest burden of getting infected, infecting others, and dying from COVID-19 than any other essential workforce in our country. And they are literally dying to feed America and to give us the nutrients we need to boost our immune systems, to prevent getting sick from COVID-19 or healing from COVID-19. And so therefore, precisely now, we need to secure our food supply chain and give our essential workers, farm workers who have taken the brunt of the COVID-19, peace of mind, so that they don't have to worry about whether or not they're going to be separated from their family or be able to continue to go out and provide us with the nutrients that we need in the pandemic. And the Dream and Promise Act is vital right now in the pandemic, because dreamers are doctors and nurses and lab technicians and contact tracers and public health workers and job creators and entrepreneurs and individuals who contribute to the safety of our nation. So it is precisely now that we need to pass the Dream and Promise Act and give them a pathway to citizenship, so they too can contribute to our nation to the full extent of their capacity, and have them contribute to our fabric and our ability to combat this pandemic. And we mentioned earlier that the U.S. Citizenship Act would add an extraordinary amount of jobs and economic opportunity and financial stability for our country when we need to bounce back, and we want to bounce back better from this pandemic.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. It is interesting and sad, really, that we found out how many of these essential workers don't have documents because they were getting sick and dying, and how many of the dreamers really have been able to educate themselves, become doctors, or become people in the medical profession. But sadly, how many of them were getting sick? I think you're exactly right. Precisely now is the time. But I think that's why it's so important. We have the CHC, and the person leading it, you as a doctor. I think that that really does put us in a good place, because I do think we have to get bipartisan support. I mean, as much as I'd like to see it just pass, the reality is we do have to get bipartisan support. And what more do you think we can do, Dr. Ruiz, to get some of our Republican colleagues to work on, some of their friends over in the Senate, so we can get the dreamers an opportunity, and we can give farm workers an opportunity? What can we do?
Well, we have some very strong CHC senators, members, with the leadership of Senator Menendez, as well as Senator Padilla from California, who's the newest, most recent CHC member, but definitely not new to policy making and leadership, given his extensive history in the state legislature, as well as Secretary of State of California. And we have Senator Lujan and Senator Cortez Mastos that are really forging the bipartisan work with Senator Durbin, meeting with individuals like Graham and Rubio and others to start crafting the appetite to introduce these bills for a vote in the Senate. And of course, those that have in the House that have voted for the bill, we need to also encourage them to reach out to their senators, Republican senators in the Senate. The reason why these bills are so popular is because they have broad bipartisan support by all Americans. In other words, the Dream and Promise Act has a 70 to 80% approval by all Americans in recent polls, including over 60, possibly even 70% of Republicans and those Senate Republican constituents and base approving the Dream and Promise Act. Furthermore, we have the growers, the chambers of commerces that are in support of the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. We have law enforcement, we have faith-based organizations that are in support of Dream and Promise Act. So there is really a broad coalition of constituents and national stakeholder organizations that are really pushing for these two bills. And of course, we do have a lot of support for the immigration reform bill. Right now, we have to address the root causes of why families are taking the treacherous and risky trip to the U.S. to find refuge and seek asylum. And the immigration reform bill addresses the root causes of those migrations because it's so important that we just don't take care of the symptoms, but we address the root cause so that we don't continue to have the massive and dangerous migrations for the sake of the families that are fleeing violence and seeking asylum in our country.
And I think that most people would love to stay in their homes, obviously where they live, in their countries they live. But as you said, we have to address the root cause of what's causing them to migrate. I have to remember and remind our listeners that, you know, that this very similar package of bills passed the Senate once. As you know, they did have the ability to send it. We never got to vote on it in the Congress because the speaker at the time wouldn't allow us. It was a Republican and wouldn't allow us to vote because I think it would have passed. But it did pass once out of the Senate with bipartisan support. So I'm hoping that, you know, through all the murkiness of obviously the politics that were stirred up by the previous administration around immigration, that we can get past that and get back to a situation where we can look at this thing reasonably and objectively. And I think it would pass again. I think it would pass out of the Senate again. You know, as I would remind our listeners, it passed once out of the Senate and never actually got out of the Congress.
It did. And that's very important to note because that was a missed opportunity for our country to finally provide immigration reform for our nation. And as you mentioned, Speaker Boehner, Republican, just refused to bring it up. The votes were there. The count showed that we could have done it. But because of that decision, the Speaker of the House has the authority to decide which bills we vote on the House floor. This individual decided to not allow a vote, and we missed that opportunity to get immigration reform done.
Yeah, and also Paul Ryan, who followed him. I was hopeful that I knew Paul pretty well, and I was hopeful that he would put it up for a vote, and he wouldn't because of the Hastert rule. It said a majority of the Republicans have to agree on the bill before they put it up, but we didn't quite get a majority of the Republicans. But we had a lot of Republicans that were prepared to vote for it, and yet we couldn't get a vote because, as you know, it would have passed. So I'm still hopeful. I know that unfortunately politics has raised its ugly head here through the previous administration around immigration, but I'm still hopeful that reasonable minds will come together and we can do the right thing for our country and pass comprehensive immigration reform. I would encourage the people that are listening to write to their Congress members, write to their senators, to push, to get this thing done. I guess, lastly, I would ask you, Dr. Ruiz, what can our constituents do? I mean, what can we ask of them to help in this very important issue?
Well, one is to show strong support for all three bills with their members of Congress, and I'm assuming that you're so popular, Congressman, that you have listeners from so many different districts throughout California and our country. So if it's one, it's good to be activated and engaged with your member of Congress, showing support for these three bills. Write in, make comments on social media on the reason why we need this, and write into your local newspapers in support of your member. Or if your member's not for this, then I would write about the importance of passing these bills. Clearly, the majority leader in the Senate is key, and Mitch McConnell is key on the Republican side. And just continue. I mean, you can also show your support by writing them letters and really, really increasing the conversation around making sure we get these three bills past the House, the Senate, onto President Biden's desk.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ruiz. I got to tell you, I'm not that popular. What little popularity I have is because of good friends like you. And I have to say, it really does shine through when you speak. You speak with authority, not only as obviously the chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, but as a doctor and as a humanitarian. There's so much I could tell people about you. They don't even know all the places you've been during disasters to go help as a medical doctor. And it really does warm our heart. And we're very, very proud of you. And I want to thank you again for coming on today. This is our first podcast that I tell my listeners, the first one that I've done. And we do have a comment area. If you'd like to RSVP in upcoming events, you can go to vargas.house.gov RSVP. And again, we appreciate your participation. And Dr. Ruiz, I'll give you the last word. I can't thank you enough. Again, we were all very, very proud to vote for you. And your leadership so far has been one that we have been extremely proud of and very happy to support you.
Well, Congressman Vargas, it's easy to be the chair when you have stellar star members who are amongst the most talented and skilled leaders in our nation. And I'm referring to you. And with your history, your passion, your background, and what you bring to the table with your wisdom and your focus is truly remarkable. It's an honor to serve with you. It's an honor to listen to your sage recommendations and advice, and your passion to getting immigration reform done is unparalleled by anyone in Congress. And so I appreciate you. I appreciate your humanity. I appreciate your leadership. And it's because of you and members like you within our 38-member Congressional Hispanic Caucus, including our 4 senators, that we have such leverage and ability to really move our legislations that will not only help Hispanic Americans, but our entire country progress as under the rubrics of creating opportunities for everyone. And so thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you, and it's such an honor to be part of your first podcast.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ruiz. Again, I want to thank our listeners. And again, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for those kind words. Once again, thanks for listening. Goodbye.